We are later. All right. I think we should get started. Good early afternoon, everyone. My name is Bodo Kubarts, and I have the pleasure and honor to moderate this session on the Southeast Asian market. I'm from Germany. I'm a trained geographer, economic geographer, and for that reason it makes even more sense to speak about that region of the world, which is, I think, and we think, increasing in terms of the relevance and the value also for artistic perfumery. Let me start by introducing the panelists here today, and I'm very honored and pleased to have four outstanding panelists on the panel. Eloise Lefebvre-Dupré is South Asia Project Manager at Asia Cosmelab. Eloise is a leading expert on beauty trends in Southeast Asia, and she's working for that company and consultancy in Paris. She's based part-time in Jakarta, and she specializes in market intelligence, covering topics such as green and clean beauty, halal beauty, and cultural beauty perspectives. She frequently speaks at international beauty conferences and serves as a jury member for industry awards. At this panel, Eloise will provide key insights into Southeast Asia's evolving beauty landscape and how regional trends influence the fragrance sector. Arnaud Guggenboul is Head of Global Marketing Insight and Image Fine Fragrance at Givaudan. Arnaud brings over 2 decades of expertise in beauty and fine fragrance marketing, having worked with industry giants such as Unilever, L'Oreal, and Takasago before joining Givaudan. He is known for bridging market intelligence with olfactory creativity, helping beauty and luxury brands anticipate societal shifts, consumer habits, and fragrance trends on a global scale. And at this panel, Arnaud will share his expertise on fragrance supply, highlighting key regional ingredients, olfactory identities, and market-driven scent innovations. Elizabeth Liao is the founder and CEO of Maison de l'Asie, and Elizabeth is the visionary behind this brand, one of Southeast Asia's pioneering luxury niche fragrance brand. With a background spanning finance, arts, and global brand building, she seamlessly blends Asian heritage with French perfumery, crafting fragrances that tell immersive cultural stories. Her brand is now sold in over 15 countries worldwide. And at this panel here, Elizabeth will offer insights into brand building in Southeast Asia, discussing how cultural narratives shape fragrance identity and consumer engagement. And last but not least, Francis Albert Labora is Head of Business Development and Marketing at Scent & Boutet Incorporated. Francis leads one of the most influential fragrance distribution companies in the Philippines, managing brands from luxury houses like Prada and Armani to niche names such as Sergioff and BDK. With an in-depth knowledge and experience in beauty retail and marketing, he plays a key role in shaping the accessibility and visibility of artistic perfumery in Southeast Asia. And at this panel, Francis will discuss the distribution landscape, challenges and opportunities for artistic perfumery in Southeast Asia, both in retail and e-commerce. Let me give a few reasons why it is very worth to speak about this part of the world and this market. So I listed a couple of different aspects that we see as relevant. If you look at the 4 points that I also got from a McKinsey report recently, you see that luxury and niche fragrances are also driven by the expanding middle class and the incomes that this expanding middle class is having, by a digital transformation, of course. So online perfume sales is also increasing in that part of the world. And we also speak about the rich cultural landscape and local identity here at the panel. I think that's also a very relevant and very valid point here to make. Of course, there are some challenges also to this market. I just want to briefly mention that with the ongoing or developing geopolitical tensions and trade uncertainties, there might be some challenges also in that part of the world, speaking about tariffs and so forth. But we don't want to focus on those in particular. So let's start let's have this overview, the topical foci, meaning we will start with the market research perspective, then go into detail about fragrance supply, then speak about a fragrance brand, and finally speak about fragrance distribution. So we'll start, and I'm sitting down now, with Eloise about 2 major themes, namely broader trends in beauty and focused trends in fragrance. So the first question to Eloise, what are the most defining beauty trends that you see emerging in Southeast Asia today? Yeah.
Do you hear me correctly? Yeah. Okay. So let me put you a little bit of images here to illustrate my 4 biggest trends in Southeast Asia. First, the beauty tradition that is really rooted in nature and wellness is very important in Southeast Asia. As you know, for instance, in Thailand, the spa culture, using Thai herbals, using essential oil, is still very present in the beauty culture. And for instance, we have brands like perfumery, who started as a spa-focused brand. They then entered the skincare space, and today they're also entering the fragrance space. So first, this is very important to really think about wellness and nature being really related to Southeast Asian beauty. Then, of course, we have the more like glam and glowy attitude. It comes with a love of color cosmetic, which is really important in both Indonesia, in Thailand, but also in Filipinos. And for instance, we see that there is now a love for K-beauty that is very, very important, with new textures such as lip tints, cushions, jelly, blushers that are really working well in these markets. And so we see that these are markets that are really into beauty, not just fragrance. Then we have the importance of the local power, and this is really, really important because much like the emergence of sea beauty trends in China, we now see that homegrown brands in Indonesia, in Thailand, are really taking over the markets because they are very good at capturing the international trends, the K-beauty trends, but also tailoring it to the local needs and to the local price points. So the local power is really important. And then the 4th trends would be the rise of skin-intellectuals consumers. They are really acquiring a skincare expertise. They are knowing a lot about ingredients. They are really gravitating towards brands that are more science-backed or more derma-oriented. And this is, of course, pushed by social media. And this is also something that we're going to see in fragrance. We have consumers that were skin intellectuals that are now also becoming fragrance intellectuals, knowing way more about layering, about scents, about notes. So yeah, that would be the 4 beauty trends to think about.
Yeah, perfect. I think that relates also to the second broader questions looking at beauty trends in general. So what's the role of digital platforms in terms of e-commerce and social media in shaping those trends in Southeast Asia?
So we know that worldwide, social media is really shaping the beauty industry, but I would say that in Southeast Asia, it's also very strong. For instance, we know that Indonesia is the second country for TikTok in the world. So it's like the second biggest country for TikTok. So we know the importance of social media. And we know that TikTok and Instagram, they really play a role of beauty trends incubators because they're able to really capture all the trends coming from Asia, from Western world, and all the consumers are able to see these trends to adapt them into their routines. And when it comes to more e-commerce platforms, we know that TikTok Shop, that Lazada and Shopee in Southeast Asia have really changed the face of beauty. They have accelerated all the trends. And we also know that, for instance, social commerce and everything that is live streaming, that was more inspired first from China, but now really popular also, for instance, in Indonesia, is really merging the idea of entertaining and also instant purchase beauty decisions, which really shape this beauty industry. And it's also the case for fragrance, because of course we have seen it that moving to beauty and also to fragrance, how influencers, for instance, on TikTok are really educating consumers into knowing the best notes, knowing the best way to apply fragrance and so on. And so the consumer are becoming more and more sophisticated due to that exposure to social media.
Yeah. Perfect. I think if we are looking now into more detailed focus on fragrance trends, what do you think has gained most traction in that part of the world, and what do those trends actually reveal also about the consumer preferences there?
So I would say there is a premiumization and also the rise of local brands in Southeast Asia. While the international brands have really dominated the market for a long time, we now see that the homegrown brands are making a very strong impact, and they are elevating local fragrance to a more premium level. And one of the examples that I really like about that is this Indonesian brand called Alchemist. They launched a collection called Les Classiques. It was a collaboration between Grasse and Jakarta, which is quite unique, I think. And they are really featuring scents that are made by renowned perfumers and in a very trend-forward way. There is also a trend not only on fine fragrance, but also home fragrance. That is a space that is growing really fast now in Southeast Asia. We have examples like Maison Baguian from Vietnam that is playing more of the craftsmanship and using traditional candles, for instance. And we also have spa brands like Divana, for instance, in Thailand, that are really tapping into the home fragrance space and offering scented products that are more about luxury living and relaxation. And about that, if you go to Bangkok, I invite you to see the new store, the new One Bangkok Mall. They have this new niche fragrance with a lot of local niche fragrance brands that are really interesting to look at. And the second trend I want to mention is the fact that fragrance is not just about premiumization, it's also about being in every kind of format in beauty, being in body and hair care mist, being in scented lip care, being even in tools like scented hairbrush, or even a collaboration that I really like in Indonesia too was Iris and Hint. It was a collaboration between a fragrance brand and tools brand that were using these soap bars to clean your sponge, your makeup sponge, and they partnered with a fragrance brand to make a specific fragrance for these particular soaps. So really we see it infusing all of the categories, not just the fragrance. And even more recently, we have seen examples of Thai brands using fragrance in the the sunscreens. So we are seeing that it can go very far, even into the skincare space, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. Perfect. I think it relates also to a degree to the next question, namely what kind of scent profiles that you see as particular in this part of the world. So do you see also some roots in local traditions in that context?
So it's quite interesting to look at what are the trending notes and what's really happening on the market. Is that, of course, we see a lot of international trends that are being reflected on the market. We are seeing, for instance, the gourmand notes like vanilla, caramel, floral notes, citrusy notes that are used by local brands. One that I really like is also the milky notes. We know that these notes are also really popular in North Asia, and now we see this Indonesian brand called Mykonos who did this milk-like kind of fragrance, and this fragrance was actually sold out a lot of times, so it really resonates with consumers locally. And in a more local kind of perspective, we see, especially among more niche brands, that the brands that are rooted in more traditional heritage and nature, they are also using particular ingredients or scents that reminds consumer of local traditions and of also food experience, for instance. And one thing that I really like is that these brands are, for instance, like Da Nam in Vietnam. They launched this Vietnamese coffee EDP, which is also a very trendy trend at the moment. So a scent at the moment, and a trendy drink. So they're also playing with the food and drink industry. There is this scent of Jart, which is Indonesian brand called Mango Sticky Rice. And you also have a more niche and more premium brand from Thailand, quite new, Sai Salang, who launched the Holy Krapao, so it's the Holy Thai Basil kind of scent to really remind of like local food and local culture. So yeah, I think there's a really deep anchorage also in the idea of having very local scents that talk to consumer, and that can also talk to consumer worldwide who would be interested in that kind of scent.
I think that perfectly relates to the last question for Eloise and market research in particular, namely the opportunities and challenges for that part of the world in the next few years, so to say.
Yeah, so in terms of opportunities, we have been discussing with the panel that Southeast Asia is really at its early stage in terms of fragrance. So, and these are huge countries. So of course, there is a lot of space on the markets. And as consumers are getting more educated about fragrance, they are really interested in niche brands, for instance. So there is a big space. There is also probably a space for personalization, for very unique concepts. And sustainability might also be one of the maybe in a longer kind of long-term vision, but can also be something to think about when thinking about fragrance in the region. In terms of challenges, I would say one of the challenges that I see a lot, especially for instance in Indonesia, is that people are so fond of also international fragrance, but a lot of brands are making kind of dupes of their international bestsellers. And so how can international brands can actually navigate the markets with a lot of brands taking their own concept and just making dupes, but at a very affordable level for consumers? That would be one of the challenges that I see today on the market.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, first of all, Eloise, for this part, market research. We directly continue to talk about fragrance supply, and it's a pleasure again to have Arnaud answering the questions. Focusing on two main parts, namely ingredients and regional scent identity, and second, sustainability and supplier-based collaboration. So, first of all, what are some key or factory notes commonly associated with that part of the world, and how are they actually used in perfumery today?
Thank you. So, in fact, I have to say that when we are talking about Southeast Asia, I want to say that it's a region, but the countries within this region are super different, you know. So we have also to be careful in terms of generalization. So it's the reason why I'm much more like putting these pictures that are contrasting and that are showing the contrast that exists within the region also. And I think that when you are looking for Southeast Asia, it's interesting to see what can be inspiring for Southeast Asian consumer, but how also Southeast Asia can inspire the rest of the world. And for me, this is really this interaction that will build the future olfactive corridor between Southeast Asia and the global world, and also how brands can play on at both levels. So as you can see, of course, when you are thinking about Southeast Asia, you know, it's all about some iconic raw materials like patchouli that is originated from this region, you know, but also we can think about radiant note, floral, solar flower, you know, like, you know, coconut, all these kind of amazing pictures that can be super inspiring for the rest of the world. But we also have to think that this region is super connected with Middle East, and there are a strong inspiration between Middle East and Southeast Asia in terms of olfactory preferences. What is interesting also is to see that from the trends that Eloise was talking about, we can also see some interesting olfactive aspect linked to these trends. When we are talking about this region, it's all about conviviality and positivity. That means that fragrances that are conveying joyfulness, vibrancy, radiantness are generally super well accepted by the consumers in this region. It's also super interesting to talk about the fact that, this region is really driven by the Gen Z, so they are really experience seekers. And when you are talking about experience seekers, it's all about experimenting new influences. And for example, the milky notes that we were talking about are super interesting. The coffee culture is growing within all the region. And when we are talking about other influence, the K-beauty is super interesting to look at, but also from an olfactive point of view, we know that some K-beauty brands, if I'm thinking bound to stand out, the way they are treating the fruity notes and the gourmand notes can become new source of premiumness for fruity acceptance within Southeast Asia. And finally, I have to say that the local pride, it's super important and super interesting, and some key ingredients originating particularly from the spa and the wellness industry, aromatic notes, basil notes, green notes could be very interesting to look at, and also some fruitiness that are super interesting.
Yeah, you just mentioned that the diversity even in Southeast Asia is quite high, but do you also see some specific accords that reflect this cultural diversity in that region?
Yes, because what we are seeing is, as Eloise was saying, is a strong premiumization within this market. And that means that, it's super interesting to see how the e-commerce and the social media is able to bring new sensory experiences within the region. And I have to say that some brands are very pushy and interesting in the way they are marketing themselves. I'm thinking about Home of Humans in Indonesia that launched a fragrance called Orgasm that is a strong vanilla. I'm thinking also about Myth in Thailand that is really focusing on the proudness of made in Thailand, fragrances, and that Givaudan is working with a lot. I'm also thinking about Mother of Pearl that is really revealing the behind of the scent. So this notion of revealing the backstage of the fragrance creation is super interesting. So a lot of different, areas that are showcasing how, trendy this market is becoming, or a brand like Onyx that is always focusing with funny and disruptive way of communicating. And, when you are seeing that at the brand level, you can imagine the impact it has at the olfactive level. So I try to put a very colorful slide for you to capture and to see how this market is evolving from a texture point of view. Because, it's really about scent with texture that are pleasing this market. So, of course, the floral fruity is an absolute win for this region. It's a must-have. What is interesting is that now we are more and more focusing on juiciness, the flesh of the fruit, something that is really, juicy, even slightly syrupy, which was not the case before. It's always important to keep in mind that within the region, because of the climate, a hint of freshness is always accepted, particularly on the top of the fragrance, because there is a need, to breathe. Floracity is absolutely something key also within the region, but we are seeing a strong move from traditional rose and muguet notes into more white flower, sorrel flower, orange blossom type of notes that are very interesting, but don't make it too heavy also. Ambery and woody notes are also interesting because, they are part of this Middle East inspiration, and we are seeing more, I would say, toasted, sweet, creamy, woody notes. And finally, this notion of explosion of texture and color is really the perfect way to please the Gen Z in this region. When it comes to raw materials, of course, it's a super important region for fragrance houses and for the brands because it's the region where, some iconic ingredients used in perfumery are originating from. I'm thinking of agarwood in Thailand or the patchouli in Indonesia. I will not enter into all the detail, but of course, the way we are, in fact, looking at this ingredient at a sustainability point of view, it's absolutely fundamental if we want to secure the future of perfumery for this region, but for the rest of the world. And 3 other ingredients that can be also very interesting to consider originated from this region are the vetiver from Indonesia, that is also very interesting, you know, because it has a more, I would say, smoky taste than the vetiver coming from India, and this could be also very interesting to look at. Benzoin, it's super interesting also because generally it's coming from Laos, but we have a quality coming from Sumatra that is completely new and different, that is also giving this creaminess and this warmth that could be very interesting for the region. And when it comes to spices, you know, you have another particularity, a specific ginger, that is the purple ginger, that is coming also from the region, that is very interesting because it's more intriguing and it's bringing newness within the spicy area.
I think if you can go on to the next question, we briefly spoke about sustainability, and I think it's another big topic to talk about. If we focus on the next question, looking at local ingredient suppliers and global brands, I'm curious how those collaborations with partners in that part of the world actually shape also the future of perfumery, broadly speaking.
So for us, it's absolutely key to secure the ingredients, you know, and for that we are really working with the supplier locally. Generally, we have a foundation at Givaudan called the Givaudan Foundation that is partnering with the farmers, specifically on the patchouli in Indonesia, that as you may know, we are living in a big crisis about patchouli at the moment, so securing the supply of patchouli and having the best farming practice is absolutely key. Of course, for agarwood, it's also the case, you know, with the Middle East trend, you can imagine how, you know, all the brands are focusing on agarwood and being able to plant the tree, replant the tree, and focusing on the way we are supplying these ingredients is absolutely fundamental. And of course, this palette, you know, we are offering it to the global brands and to the local brands. The idea is that generally they are not using it the same way because of the cost of the juice, the cost of the perfume, but at least it's absolutely key for me to ensure this concept within the beauty of nature that is offered by this region.
And last but not least, the final question for Arnaud. How has Givaudan supported emerging brands from that part of the world finding their unique olfactory identity?
I have the feeling that what is important when we are working with local brands is really to find the balance between, I would say, niche and local appeal, because you know we have to still educate a lot of the consumer within this country. Indonesia, Thailand, and now Vietnam are the countries that are the more into a new sense, and you know it's super interesting because as much the Gen Z within this country is growing, as much they would like to have differentiating sense, but still if you want to do a little bit of business, it's important to understand also the trends that are infused within the market and the trends, you know, that we can combine between broader appeal and specificity. So it's the reason why that, for example, I told you House of Human or Miss are brands we are working with a lot to find the right balance between, you know, an appeal and a distinction that will create uniqueness for those regions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Arnaud.
Thank you.
Next fragrance brand. So Elizabeth of Maison de la Zie. We will focus on two topics and two themes here, namely regional inspiration and cultural narrative first, and then consumer dynamics and future vision. So my first question to you, how does Maison de la Zie, your brand, capture the essence of Southeast Asia in its fragrances?
Do you know, as I was listening to the presentation and some of the other fragrance houses that were mentioned, my name is Maison de la Zie, the brand. It's French, and so are some of the other houses, you know, and we create and develop our creations inspired by French perfumery. We work with French perfumers. I order French oils. And it's a very relevant question as to how am I then an Asian brand? What is an Asian voice? And I ask that question to the audience. I ask that myself sometimes. What is an Asian voice? And for me, when I created Maison de la Zie, it was with that sincere intent to capture the soul of Asia. What does it mean to me? It's really about that mystery and that intrigue and that quiet sensuality of Asia that I wanted to convey. And it was about capturing the narratives that I felt weren't really vocalized in the market. So our brand positioning, one of the core philosophies is perfumes of an unexpected Asia. And so I wanted to interpret Asia in a way that was different. And how I do that is with narratives and philosophies that are inherently Asian, but yet globally relevant, with themes that cut across geographical markets. And I deliberately wanted to avoid the stereotypes and the narrow definitions of what Asia should look like or sound like or smell like. And I think, using just one ingredient or local ingredients to capture the essence of a country or a continent isn't really doing it justice. Right. I think there's more imaginative ways of giving that narrative. I think there's more ways to give that original interpretation of the stories. And again, so it's more than just a product for me. It's really about that emotional connection, using perfumes as a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the second question relates to what you just brought up, because as I put it here, cultural and natural heritage and which aspects of Southeast Asia are in those parts. Yeah. How do you actually shape your creations accordingly?
So, Arno brought up a point about defining Southeast Asia, or even Asia as a whole. So it's impossible to sort of summarize it, because across the different countries, we have different belief systems, we have different approaches to craft, and it's all unique, but there's a very strong and visible thread that connects all of us. And so at Maison de Lazy, I try to embed that philosophy into all aspects of the brand, whether it's in the storytelling, in the product, the packaging, or the experience. And broadly speaking, if we go into the technicalities of it, the Asian approach to craft, just craft, there's a very strong focus on attention to details. There's a blend of that artistry with philosophy and spirituality, and the harmony. There's a strong emphasis on balance and harmony between aesthetics and function, and so I try to incorporate all of that into the approach. And so it's very much apparent in our design philosophy, and even in the scents that we create. It's all about the details as well. So we have a very multi-layered approach to how our perfumes open. Again, it's the approach of details in that scent opening and that harmony and how it all comes together in the scent at the end.
Yeah. I think in this second part of our conversation, looking at the consumer dynamics, I'm curious to learn, or we are curious to learn about how consumers in different parts of the world actually responded to your fragrances, because those preferences are particularly distant compared to global markets, I guess. If you are looking at consumers from Asia versus from Europe and versus from North America, I'm sure there must be some differences in the recognition and response.
There was. So as a brand owner, I think it's interesting to have that first-hand perspective where it wasn't easy. Like at the start, as an Asian brand, the truth is there is a long-standing perception of what quality perfumes, or where it should come from, right? From Europe, from the Middle East. And even if that perception isn't there, there's an expectation of what an Asian perfume should smell like. I get asked that a lot. Do my perfumes, does it smell just a literal translation of that country? And it's not. So I think for Maison de Lazy, perfumes of an unexpected Asia, which is how we present ourselves, really started to resonate both regionally in Asia and also internationally, because they felt that it was a voice that was lacking. And so there is a growing appreciation for that a different cultural narrative intertwined, with a more modern approach. Because from the Asian consumers, this is something that is familiar yet globally placed, right? And of course, with the international market, it's a different approach. The narrative, the storytelling, the connection's different. We speak the universal language of luxury and elegance, but the travel narratives, that was an easy hook, right? Yeah. So we do work very closely, like internationally, with the local creatives and our local partners to co-create content and experiences that's culturally representative, but still empathetic to each market's uniqueness.
Right.
Yeah.
The next question relates also to your comment at the beginning that storytelling for your brand is very relevant. How do you connect your brand with those different regional and international audiences then?
Storytelling, okay. So storytelling for me, for it to be truly effective, it has to be relevant. And it's to ask the question, what chord exactly are we striking? Because everyone has a story. But if it's not relevant, you're just talking to yourself or just that one person in the audience. And for me, it's a process of incarnation where you're really giving body to what was previously invisible and inaudible. And perfumes is just a wonderful platform for storytelling because if you do it right, you don't need words. So for, again, Maison de l'Asie, our travel narrative is just the hitter. But my personal approach is having more meaningful points of reflection and the philosophies that run through it. So it's not the most conventional approach because I think how some brands do it, they focus on a product and what they connect with is that very primal, immediate emotional need, the need to feel masculine, feminine, sexy. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to go for a deeper connection and an intellectual experience that you carry as you wear a scent. And it's different. In Asia, the storytelling is very much revolved around heritage, family, community, and so we localize our campaigns to reflect those themes. But internationally, the storytelling is a bit different. In our Western markets, the travel narratives work very well. So it's the resonance is different. But I think personally, from the business perspective, if I may just say a little bit about this, I think this is the difference between a business that sells a product versus a brand that stands for something, because your storytelling and what's behind the brand comes through in the stories, right? And I think authentic storytelling is so important in the crowded marketplace because that's how you humanize the brand. That's how you make it a bit more aspirational, a bit more inspirational. And that for me is that's what true engagement's about, yeah.
Right. Okay, and the last question also relates again to the outlook for the future. At the beginning, I introduced you having Maison de l'Asie having 15 countries opened now. My last question is, how do you see the brand developing over the next couple of years, both in terms of the footprint and contributing also to Southeast Asia's olfactory narratives?
I think in general we are well placed in the market. Having started the brand 5 years ago, you see a lot of changes and the changes in perception to a brand from Asia. And so when I say well placed, it's because even our creations, our perfumes, we broadly break it down into the main categories of fresh, floral, and amber. So it was deliberate. It was really to cater for the different market preferences. And again, as it was mentioned earlier, the taste preferences of consumers both in Asia and in the Middle East and even Europe is changing. So we, having looked at that, we spent a lot of time in the last couple of years looking overseas first. We continue to do that this year. We're expanding heavily in our key markets of North America, of Middle East, of Europe, UK. And I think even just the footprint that we're looking at and how we enter those markets, the approach is different. So we continue to work very closely with our trade partners and also participating in shows like this, going very strong on a digital front for some countries that require that. And we're very excited because we're also expanding our product range, and we're looking at having a master perfumer collection that we're launching at this show, and also a lifestyle collection that's becoming more important, I think. Yeah, so we're excited about where we'll be in the next 5 years.
Right. All right, thank you very much,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
And if you haven't been to the booth, so please visit Maison de l'Asie. And last but not least, fragrance distribution. It's a pleasure to have Francis here, and we are talking about two different themes, namely first, consumer preferences and trends in that part, and then retail strategies and e-commerce. So my first question to you as a distributor in the Philippines, what are the key fragrance preferences you observe among consumers in Southeast Asia, particularly in your country?
Okay, well, generally in the Philippines, because of our weather, we are more into fresh and florals. But however, in the past, maybe about 7-8 years, I've seen a lot of evolution with the Filipinos in terms of appreciating more of the leather and the ouds. And now they're more educated in terms of what a night and a day fragrance is. So in that aspect, we're a little bit more diverse already, but in general, it's really the fresh and the florals.
Okay. When I introduced or when we spoke in advance, you mentioned that there are some differences between the, so to say, established brands out of the niche and niche perfumes. So what challenges, especially in distributing artistic perfumes in a region as diverse as Southeast Asia, do you see? And can you give some examples of the Philippines in that part?
I think one thing that Elizabeth mentioned is the cultural diversity. We are in the same region, however, we're alike but different. So and like in the Philippines specifically, the challenge is really we're a very fragmented country. Geographically, it's not accessible to everyone. So we don't have land masses most of the time. You need to either to take a boat or a plane. So it's very challenging in terms of geographics, economic disparities as well. In the Philippines, not everybody can get credit card immediately. So even for e-commerce, it's a challenge because most e-commerce platforms offer credit card payments. So that's one. I think those are the challenges that we face.
Okay. When I introduced you, I mentioned that Scent & Beauté has both the established brands and the niche brands. Do you see or have you seen a shift in consumer behavior in terms of awareness of artisanal and niche brands? Have they increased?
Oh, definitely. Because I think nowadays, Filipino or maybe even in Southeast Asia, they have a craving for authenticity and uniqueness already. So, I mean, as much as all these popular premium brands are, very much available, a lot of people are now wanting to be more authentic and unique. They don't want to go with the flow anymore. So they want to be different. So yes, there has been a shift in terms of consumer behavior. They're more appreciative of niche fragrances now because of its uniqueness and authenticity.
Yeah. In this second part of our conversation, we are looking onto retail, and as you, as a distributor, work closely with retailers, my first question here is, how does your company approach retailing artistic perfumes differently from the other perfumes that are more established on the market?
For us, it's we value experience and exclusivity. So we're very selective in terms of the doors that we open. We're not snob, but we wanted to make sure that it's still exclusive. And when consumer goes to the stores, it's they have the experience, because unlike going to a department store where you hear all of these VAs asking you to smell everything, in our store, it's more experiential. You know, we in fact call our fragrance advisors not advisors. We call them fragrance concierge. so, so it's more personalized.
Okay.
So yes.
And the final question to you, and we spoke about that, all the other panelists also mentioned that, we've seen, or we are seeing, an increasing role in terms of e-commerce. Can you tell some examples how that role is recognizable in terms of niche fragrances?
The TikTok generation is really definitely influencing the landscape of niche fragrances, whether it's in physical or e-commerce. I think nowadays it's the young influencing the old now. It's the reverse now. So TikTok has been very, very, I would say, influential in terms of how niche fragrances are going.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, e-commerce, I mean, it plays a good role because I said Philippines, we're very fragmented. Geographically, it's a challenge to go to specific store to get it, you know, so delivery is definitely something that...
An issue.
It's an issue, yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you, Francis. And I think we have a few more minutes for questions and answers. So if you have any questions for the... Do we have a mic somewhere? Over there. Okay.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for this nice presentation. I believe that Southeast Asia is one of the big market for the raw materials, and they are a brand for the aromatherapy, oils and the fragrance. I have one question I keep asking myself about the habit of the citizens in that region. They are importing the most of oud for the whole world, right? While the people there, they dislike until now the oud itself. They are not use it, and they dislike the smell, I think. While the most of oud, like in Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, India, Philippines as well, they are importing plenty of raw material to Middle East and Europe. Is there any thing that they dislike this kind of smell while they import it? I'm clear in my question.
I think it's a question for Anu.
I think I will try to answer your question. The reality is that Southeast Asia is the perfect region to grow the trees, you know, that are giving wood. The reality is that there is, compared to Middle East or compared to China even, and even Japan with the kodo, there is no tradition of using wood, you know, within these cultures. So here it's an ingredient that is mainly produced for exportation. The truth also is that Southeast Asian consumers, when it comes to scents, you know, for a long time they were more on the floral, they were more on the fruit, as I said. Now there is more and more woody acceptance, but between woods and oud, you also have another step, you know, and at the moment pure oud is still a bit like too smoky, too harsh, too animalic for these consumers. However, what we are seeing is that with the trends of artistic perfumery, and I would say a way of treating woody notes like clear woods and like creamy woods, there might be at some point a comeback of oud, and also because of the Middle East influence, and we are talking about the Gen M in Southeast Asia, so the Muslim generation that is very proud of the religion. We can really think and imagine that in the future, oud will also be consumed regionally, but it's not the case yet.
Thank you. I have another question, please. Regarding to the marketing, you mentioned that the TikTok generation, while still the big brands is not promoting in the TikTok, right?
Well, they're late in the game. That's it.
That's it.
They're just late in the game.
Okay. Do we have more questions? Do you have any additional questions here? If not, there is the opportunity to talk to the panelists after our panel. And I would like to close with a brief aphorism. I like to do that at every exchange. And if we look east, I think that's a very valid statement that also you brought to the table. So the beauty of the world lies in the diversity of its people, and I think that's not only true for Southeast Asia, but in particular so. And I would like to thank the panelists for being here and answering the questions, and for you also to being here and listening to us, and feel free to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.